Hello friends, my name is Stepanek, and it is a great day to follow Jesus and dive into his words. Right now I'm at the National Catholic Youth Conference in Indianapolis, and when you're watching this, you're probably going to be getting ready for the first Sunday of Advent. Advent is my favorite time of year, and while we've been here in Indianapolis, I've noticed something about myself which ties into just my overall feelings about the joy and why I guess I feel it in Advent. Is Indianapolis is cloudy. And maybe you can see like over my shoulder, it's been cloudy the entire time we're here. And I live in Phoenix right now, where it is sunny all of the time. And this increased like darkness makes me a little bit melancholy, I guess, because I'm so used to the sun and the light. But it's made me really look forward to going back home where it's going to be bright and sunny every single day. And as I've been thinking about it and just using the weather as a reflection, I think that's why I actually enjoy Advent a little bit, because Advent, and we're going to see it in the readings today, really works through this progression from darkness to light. And as Advent is, for some of us in the Northern Hemisphere especially, Advent actually follows the same progression we experience with daylight savings time and with the seasons. Like it gets darker through the months of December in the Northern Hemisphere, and then it starts to get lighter after Christmas. The days get longer. That imagery certainly may have been on the mind, I guess, of some of our ancient writers who lived a little bit, further south in the Northern Hemisphere. But the idea of moving from dark to light plays out big in the readings today. So when we look at the first Sunday of Advent, on first blush, as first glance of the readings, they seem a little dark. We've got this prophecy from Isaiah, then we've got this reading from St. Paul, and we have Jesus talking, and they're all talking about this time in the future. But some of those readings, like the in-between, can seem a little bit like, Jesus is talking about people being in the field and one being taken and one being left behind. And St. Paul is talking about, the Son of Man is returning soon. We've got to be ready. And there's this feeling of a world that is sort of still dark and waiting for the light. So in Advent, we've got this movement where the world waits in darkness for Jesus Christ, and then there's this first incarnation. But all of our readings through this season are going to point us toward Jesus' second coming. And we live in this moment where we are in the kingdom now, but there's also this not yet that's coming with it. Like the light has come into the world, but you and I know there's still a little bit of darkness. So take this first reading from Isaiah, for example. We've got this reading from Isaiah where it's right at the beginning of the book of the prophet Isaiah, and he's making this prophecy that one day, there's not going to be war. People are going to actually take their swords and they're going to mangle them into something that farms and provides food for people. They're going to take, their spears and they're going to bend those into something that can harvest for people. So there's this movement as you read, we're going to beat our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks. There's, maybe kind of like, oh, that's kind of nice. But the idea is not that people are going to stop using weapons of war, but they're actually going to turn them into something that provides for all, that farms, that's used in agriculture. And this vision comes at the beginning of the book. But here's the thing. As we read through the prophet Isaiah, he also prophesies against the king at the time, King Ahaz, and says, that the kingdom's going to fall. There's a lot that has to happen before this time of peace. And if you look at our history, we're really not even in that time of peace yet. There's still war. There's still violence. It's a prophecy that is going to come to fulfillment, and there is peace in Jesus Christ. But there's also this bigger peace, this time when heaven and earth are united, and there's no more tears, no more suffering, and this is this whole new thing. So we live in this, there's the now, the immediacy of Jesus, but then there's also this not yet. St. Paul picks up on that same theme in his letter to the Romans. He's telling people their salvation is nearer than when they first believed, which is true. Your salvation and my salvation is nearer than when we first had our first conversion moment. But there's also this not yet. So St. Paul is writing to people who are thinking the coming of Jesus Christ is going to be soon. That Jesus, when he said, hey, I'll return again, they were thinking, well, that's going to be any day now, right? So they were all sort of waiting for Jesus after he ascended into heaven to come back. And St. Paul is writing to communities that are dealing with this, what's the deal? What's the holdup with Jesus coming back and hopefully liberating us from Rome? And they were waiting in this now, but not yet. And St. Paul's reminding people, because they're starting to slip a little bit in their religious practice, hey, don't start backsliding. Don't start saying, oh, well, the second coming of Jesus, maybe he's not going to come at all, so I'll just go back to living my life the way that I was. and then I'll have a conversion moment later on. He's reminding them, don't conduct yourselves the way you did before you first believed, because the coming of the Son of Man could happen at any time. I think sometimes you and I fall into that same trap of, man, it's hard to live out the faith day to day. It's hard to practice virtue. It can be really difficult. And then we start to think about the long game, right? Well, I'll have time for that later. I'll have time to live out virtue later. I can start tomorrow. And while maybe that's been true every day up until, today, you don't know what tomorrow brings. And I'm not talking from the standpoint of like maybe tomorrow you'll pass away, but just we still live in this imminent possibility of Jesus coming again. Right in the next couple of moments, Jesus could return to earth to usher in a new heaven and new earth, and this place where people take weapons of war and destroy them and make them into something else. That could happen. And St. Paul's reminding his community and all of us that we have to be mindful of that as well. And the gospel is the words of Jesus himself talking about this. One day the Son of Man is going to come back. Jesus is going to return. And on that day, we need to be ready. We have to be prepared in the sense that we've been living our faith, and that when Jesus Christ returns, it's a moment where we are excited and not fearful. Like, even as I'm thinking about these readings, I used to be really fascinated with Jesus' second coming as a kid, and it kind of scared me a little bit. Like, what's that going to look like? Am I going to be like freaked out? Are there going to be all these crazy like angels and demons? And I think as I've gotten older, that fear is mixed with joy, but the idea that when Jesus comes again, I'd rather be joyful. I'm like, oh, thank God, Jesus has returned. The way the early Christians were excited and anticipating that return versus, oh man, I haven't been living the way that I want to be living. So Jesus reminds us of that in the gospel. And this passage was important for the early community. And as they were reading it, they were like, oh, maybe that's imminent. Maybe that's right now. But it was a not yet. And that's where we live as the church. We're in this now where Jesus has come, but there's also a not yet. That big prophecy from Isaiah, we're still waiting on fulfillment. And they, maybe at that time as he prophesied it, we're like, oh, thank goodness, there's going to be an end to war. But it's been hundreds and hundreds of years, and we're still in that not yet. St. Paul is telling people, hey, make sure that you're living your life the way you're supposed to, because Jesus Christ is going to return soon. But in the meantime, we have a job to do. And Jesus, in this passage in the gospel, is reminding people that one day this is not a maybe, this is a definitely. But until that day comes, we have to live out our faith faithfully and prudently. And Advent gives us a chance to do that. So over the next couple of weeks, as we break open the readings in the scriptures, I want you to think about this. What does it mean to live my life as though Jesus were going to knock on my door tomorrow and be like, hey, it's time? What does it mean to live my life in a way that would be proud and excited for Jesus' second coming? And then as we work towards Christmas, being mindful of what has been and Jesus ushering in salvation through his incarnation, passion, death, and resurrection, but then also recognizing that there is still a greater fulfillment that will be at hand when Jesus Christ returns again. I'm excited to journey through Advent with you, my favorite season of the year, and to journey through it with you through the readings every single Sunday. It's going to be an incredible couple of weeks until we celebrate Christmas and recognize all that the Lord has done, is doing, and will do. We'll see you next week.